my name is Billy Jensen, by the way. I'm a writer and an editor. I've been an editor of a newspaper called Boston Phoenix. I was editor of the Village Voice. And then I became a digital executive. So what we're here to talk about is playgrounds. So I became, I became a dad, really early when I was 25 years old, and I started taking my my kids to these playgrounds. And the playgrounds were just not cool. They weren't the type of playgrounds that I was into as a kid. And they didn't have the sort of same type of imagination or imagination spark that they've got. So you went to something that looked like this, which was just really kind of cool and amazing, and like you could pretend that you were like a spaceship, or pretend you were an astronaut or something like that. And in a quick 20 years, we went from this to that. All right. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that and why that happened. But we got to go all the way back to the beginning in order to figure out why that happened. All right. So so we're going to go on a little bit of a history lesson. So this is America in the late 1800s. Exactly. We're in the Industrial Revolution, right? You've got 1.7 million children working 12-hour days in factories. Look at how psyched that kid is. Check out his face. He's excited about that, right? So a bunch of people said, you know what? This is around the time that we stopped thinking of kids as like, sort of like mini adults and started thinking of them as, maybe they should be doing something else. So we started thinking, all right, there's this woman named Marie Zakreska. She went to Germany. She started thinking, all right, you know what? She saw these kids playing in the sand, and she said, you know what? I think that potentially we can have some sort of a sandbox type of thing in America. So she brought all this sand over. Well, she didn't bring the sand over from Europe. That would have been ridiculous, all right, because we have plenty of sand here. So she brought over the sand over to America, and she created America's first playground. So this happened in Boston. It wasn't called a sandbox. It was actually called a sand garden because it's Boston, and you know how Bostonians are. So now this is so now this is an old picture. I know it's a little bit grainy. That doesn't look like too much fun in that sandbox. I don't even see if the kids can actually pick up the sand and play with it or anything like that. But you know what? It was actually pretty cool that they were able to So I think this was just basically sort of a photo op or something like that. So we had our first playground, which was just basically a big pile of sand in a church. All right, the kids were like, okay, this is pretty cool. I'm playing in sand, and all right, what else you got? So we created something else, and this is what we created. So this is in Chicago. This is in the late 1890s, and you start seeing swings, because it's just kind of a swing thing, and you start seeing these kind of like jungle gyms, but you kind of just climbed up the pole and climbed down. There was really no kind of really rhyme or reason to it. It's basically just you climb up the pole or climb down. Apparently, they weren't letting these kids with the bonnets and stuff like that into that, but this is what you got, So kids were, they were kind of excited about it and stuff like that. But all right, so in the Lower East Side, we built one of these over in 1903. And 20,000 kids actually came out because of the pent-up frustration. And remember, we used to not give these kids anything to do. So, they were working in these factories, and 20,000 of them actually caused a near riot trying to play on this. And it may not look like fun, but that's what it was. I mean, these kids were so excited to actually just have some place to play, and it was just really cool. So, we're going to talk about the safety of playgrounds and things like that. I will say right now, this is one of the first seesaws. It seems like potentially, I wouldn't let my kid on this, all right? But you know what? This is one of the things that, you started having just what they started calling the 4 S's, which was slide, seesaw, sandbox, and swings. And, the kids look like they're having fun in Boston in 1909. So people started building these playgrounds across the country, mainly on the East Coast, and the National Recreation Association was established. Now, they had Teddy Roosevelt was the honorary president because he was very into play and stuff like that. A lot of Teddy Roosevelt fans in the audience. So now, in their treatise, they regarded play as a fundamental urge in human existence, scarcely less powerful and important than the urges of physical hunger and sex. So here's what you had. You had physical hunger, you had sex, you had play. Breathing was probably 4th. That's what I'm guessing. So everybody was sort of saying, all right, what's next? You know, the kids were kind of getting bored of the sort of climbing up the pole and then climbing down the pole and then maybe going on a swing or something like that. So there's a guy named Sebastian Hinton in Chicago, and he created the Jungle Gym, or the monkey bars. Now, the monkey bars were created because he actually wanted to tap into what he called, and this is a quote, the monkey instinct in children. So he created this, and this is going to be another point of irony in the story, is that he was a lawyer. And when you start thinking about the lawsuits that have happened over monkey bars throughout the years, it's actually pretty ironic. But the cool thing about the monkey bars is that the first monkey bar ever invented, and it's very rarely that you can ever say this about a specific thing, that first monkey bars is still standing. It's actually still standing in Winnetonka, Illinois. That was very, very cool. So, you know, you had some things like this like ridiculously tall slide, and you know what? You'd never see this on any kind of playground these days, but you know, it really tapped into something, and you know, when you go back to the monkey bars and things like that, it really tapped into what the playgrounds are missing today, which is letting children actually get challenged and letting children conquer risk and be able to actually go from point A to point B to point C. And most kids, you know, say on these monkey bars here, they might not go, if you're a smaller kid, you might not go to the top in the first week. You might say, I'm going to go to here, and then in the next week, I'm going to go a little bit higher, and then I'm going to go a little bit higher. And that's one of the things that we're missing now, because kids can actually complete the whole thing on the first trip. So we started hitting into the 19 teens. America went to war, and we didn't have very fit people. And this is when we started thinking about that the kids actually of the day and playground should be more about exercise, and kids need some exercise and things like that. So 25% of the men that were called to duty via the draft were deemed, they were weighed, they were measured, and this is a quote, and they were found wanting. So we packed that in, of course, you know, we came into the Depression, but then we had the WPA, which is the Works Project Administration, which is what we were trying to, you know, give people jobs and stuff like that. And one of the first things that they did was they started to build playgrounds. So these are the type of playgrounds that you saw being built, and these are the type of playgrounds that a lot of you may have seen. Now, they're really boring. Now, if you take a look at them, they're very like just square, kind of regimented. If any of you are from New York, a guy named Robert Moses built a ton of these in New York, and he was the most powerful guy in New York. Just really conquering the 4 S's, which is swings, slides, sandbox. And seesaws, thank you. And you know what? The kids started feeling, you know what? And Robert Moses, by the way, he saw that playgrounds were more about getting kids to expend energy so they wouldn't be pain in the asses when they got back home. That was his thing. Now that I consider a secondary aspect of playgrounds. You know what? First, I like to think that they're having a good time and that they're using their imagination and that they're getting some exercise out and stuff like that. But that's what he felt. So. So the kids of the 40s, thank God, and the 50s started thinking, all right, these are kind of cool, all right, you know, you gave us this thing, and what's next? Now, in England, we started seeing something a little bit cooler, and actually in all of Europe. And it was, ironically, here's another piece of irony, in the bombed out buildings from World War II. Now, in Denmark, a guy named Sorensen noticed that kids were playing in these bombed out buildings instead of actually playing in the playgrounds that they had built for these kids. And they realized, you know what, maybe we should actually build playgrounds that are kind of look like the bombed out buildings, and then the kids can actually build stuff and things like that inside of them. So he created this, and this is what is called the adventure playgrounds. And the adventure playgrounds are kind of things that you see like, you know, like maybe Tom Sawyer Island at Disneyland and things like that, where kids can climb up on rope swings and things like that, and they can go down zip lines, and they can kind of play in these things that doesn't quite seem like it's safe, but it really is kind of safe, you know what I mean? So that's the kind of stuff that was happening. And this was happening all in Europe. America wasn't happening. America was still in that regimented 1950s type of thing. But luckily, came the 60s. And came the 60s, we started getting some freakiness going on here. So a company called Creative Playthings got in touch with some abstract artists, and the abstract artists created these like weird kind of abstract sculptures and pottery type things that kids can play in. This is the Museum of Modern Art. The Museum of Modern Art actually commissioned this and this was actually built, which is great, at the north side of Manhattan, where kids can like play around, sort of like that, and jump around, but it still looks like art, and sort of like introduce the sort of playground as art. So the West Coast wasn't doing it. All this stuff was happening on the East Coast. The West Coast, not so much. Now, luckily, in 1952, we had the Dennis the Menace Playground, which is in Monterey Park, California. And this was the first themed playground. This was actually before Disneyland. So it was the first time that you actually had a children's, property that could actually, that kids can actually go in and hang out in. I found this, and it's a Facebook page called I Played at Dennis the Menace Playground and Lived. Okay, so, and I'm sorry if the people in the back can't see it, but if you look at the bottom, this guy, Christopher William Frank Muniz, said, "What happened to the spinning crane of death?" And the comments are my favorite. They got rid of it years ago, unfortunately so. Now, here's the thing. This thing had 7,000 fans. People love this thing, all right? They did take down the spinning crane of death, but people, I'd venture a guess to say that like any playground that's built today, those boring sort of like, molded plastic playgrounds are not going to have 7,000 fans, so. The 60s hit, and we got in the space race. We were all about the, who's going to go to the moon and stuff like that. So in Boulder, Colorado, we started seeing and we saw these all across the country. And these are really what sparked my imagination as a child, is being able to climb up these things and slide back down and pretend you're an astronaut and stuff like that. And we started, it really introduced the concept of the weenie. Now the weenie is something that Walt Disney created, or a term that he coined, which was about, when you see something far off, like the Cinderella's castle or like the Sleeping Beauty castle, it draws you into the park. And imagine something like this being in a park, 2 blocks away, 3 blocks away, and a kid sees it, He's going to be drawn to it, and or she's going to be drawn to it, and she's going to continually go to that place because it's a cool place to go, Then the 70s hit. And things, Gene Roddenberry probably had, I'm sure he probably hasn't seen this. If he had, there'd probably be a lawsuit because it looks suspiciously like something from Star Trek. But I want to play on this thing more than anything. I've not been able to find it actually being live or anything else. But you know what? The 70s really is considered the sort of the heyday of what was going on in playgrounds. You had Giganta. And Giganta was a robot that automatically produces fun. That's what that says there. La Cienega and Olympic, right at La Cienega Olympic, they had one of these. They did tear it down, unfortunately. I know, you'd be all there now. We wouldn't even go to the bar at the end of this. We would actually just go to La Cienega Olympic and go play on that. But it's not there anymore, so don't. All right, Astro City, the people loved it. This is a quote from the director of parks of Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, saying how great it was and how trouble-free it was and stuff like that. I mean, people were loving it. The kids were loving it. They were playing until the lights went down, until it got dark. And then the 80s. The 80s took over. And then what happened? So you started getting all these tort lawsuits against asbestos, against a whole bunch of bad stuff, the Dalkin Shield and things like that, formaldehyde. And one of the things that the Consumer Product Safety Commission went against was playgrounds, and particularly the height of playgrounds. So you remember Seward Park? In 1903, 20,000 kids rioted for the right to play. That's what it looks like today. Yeah. Remember the great-looking, rocket ship playgrounds of the past? That's them not putting it back in. That's them taking it out. Now, this is great. I mean, imagine a kid seeing this weenie from far away and saying, I'm going to run to it. I'm running to it. Oh, my God, I'm going to go on that slide. But it's actually cordoned off, and it's a sculpture. And I appreciate the fact that they've kept the artistry of it, and stuff like that. But it's a sculpture. You can't actually play on that. But there's good stuff going on, all right? I know you guys are upset. But there's good stuff going on. I mean, check out this one in the Netherlands. It looks like it's out of a Tim Burton movie. It's amazing, right? You get this one. We do have adventure playgrounds in America. There's a little girl playing with a saw, which is fine. But they do have. But they do have people like watching over and stuff like that. But you know what? It's just a really cool place to go. We have 3 adventure playgrounds in America. There's 1,000 in Europe. This one I really appreciate. It's in Alameda. I appreciate the thought. You see this guy over there in the car? That's the security guard, because the slide goes so fast that they actually need somebody there to make sure that nobody gets hurt. This one is in Valencia, Spain. Like, kids can pretend that they're like little Lilliputians and stuff like that, you know? This is the bronze guy in Manhattan, just like a really cool place where kids can play and stuff like that. And this is an awesome slide in Paris. You know, when you're noticing something right here is that there's nothing in LA. So I'm going to call on you guys. We got to get something in LA. And one of the things that I've been talking about with friends of mine and stuff like that is how we can do stuff in LA. And I actually talked to some of my friends. They created a really cool like Arctic park and like what that would look like. And that's one of the things that I'm working on is like just to get artists involved. And there's like 3 things that we need to do. One is we need to chill out on the lawsuits. My daughter actually broke her arm on a playground. I think she was 6 years old. She fell off of a slide, and she had 2 pins put in her elbow. I didn't sue. There wasn't like a nail sticking up out of the slide or anything like that. It was all good. You know what I'm saying? So that's the first thing. Second thing is we need government involvement. We need to get some grants and things like that. And third is we need to get the artists involved. And the artists to actually go in and say, you know, and how great would it be to have like a Shepherd Ferry playground? I mean, who wouldn't want to play in that? But it's more than that. Here's the thing that I really want to take home is that it's more than just for kids. I mean, one of the things that I wanted to do here, and I just didn't have the budget for it, is that after my talk, I wanted like everybody to go off like on a slide like out that window back there, but we just couldn't do that. But you know, one of the things that Walt Disney did was, and the reason why he came up with Disneyland is that he used to watch his children play at, you know, these at the merry-go-round, and he would just like sit on a bench and watch them play. And he realized that, you know what, it'd be great to have a theme park that he can actually join in the fun. And I think that's really one of the things that we're missing here, is that I would really like to see adults actually, you know, playing on playgrounds. I don't think it's that crazy of an idea. And you know, eventually, potentially having you know, different parks having, you know, almost arms races for who has the best playground. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it.